Hello and welcome to the BCRC show, the show that advocates that BC resources should make BC jobs. I am your host, Clint Chappell, and we are live here today from Hub Space in downtown Prince George. Before I introduce the guest, I just want to thank all the essential workers that are currently keeping us safe from the COVID-19 virus. You guys are doing awesome stuff. Thank you very, very much for all the support. Also, guys, please visit our website at www.thebcrc.ca for anything you need as far as BCRC is related. So my guest is the Mayor of Prince George, Mayor Lyn Hall. How are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, good, Clint. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's awesome.
First time I've done an interview in a vault.
Yeah, this is the bank vault, and it's lots of fun. It's really, it's a good space here that Hub Space has. So, again, if you need anything from the website, please visit the website. Mayor, I think we're just going to get right into this right away. So let's just start with the economy before COVID-19 here in Prince George. How was that?
Well, I'll go back to 2015, Clint, and we had a pretty decent year in 2015, and it just started to multiply for those following years. And I think a big part of what I wanted to do when I came in as mayor was open the city up, let people know inside the city and outside the city that we're open. We're open for business. There was a number of things that I knew that I really wanted to promote, a number of things that I felt the city needed. And I think really interestingly enough, one of the first calls I made was to a company out of Kamloops who had originally come to council and talked about their development, which was Riverbend Seniors Housing, and we desperately needed that. And so we move along for 4 or 5 years. 2019 was one of the best years we'd had from a building permit perspective. We were about $223 million in building permits. And we anticipated that 2020 would be bigger than 2019. So when we hit the 223 mark in 2019, we were somewhere around $820 million in building permits and construction since 2015. And this year we would have hit $1 billion. Well, that's not the case. And a great percentage of that, probably 90 or 92% of that, was private sector investment. And that private sector investment at that magnitude really told us that people have confidence in the city, confidence in investing here and coming and developing here. We're about 84% down from April 2019 to April 2020. A huge hit as a result of the pandemic. We still saw major construction in a lot of the sites, the new Hyatt, the new Park House development, the school continued. Student housing project by the library continued working, but we've seen still a tremendous amount of interest in the community, but people are waiting a bit. If it doesn't happen this year, we'll probably see it in 2020 or 2021.
So again, guys, here before we get too far into this, I can see the numbers slowly climbing. So visit our Instagram page, and the Instagram is at the BCRC. Also visit our Facebook page. Obviously you have Facebook, but again, it's facebook.com/thebcrc.ca. Visit our Twitter, that is BC_resources. Also visit our YouTube page. Our YouTube page, we have our own channel. So go to YouTube, type in BC Resources Coalition on YouTube, as well as on LinkedIn. So Mayor, coming out of COVID-19, what's the restart plan there? What type of role does the municipality play in that?
I think what we're seeing now that we're into phase 2 and we're looking at restarting, I think municipalities are going to play a huge role in the recovery, the economic recovery. And I'll talk just specifically about Prince George. We just went through a budget process and we deferred about $25 million worth of projects, but we kept about $90 million worth of projects on the books. And those projects are all infrastructure projects that are certainly going to keep the labor market strong, the workforce strong. It's going to be private sector guys that come in to do that work, people that do water and sewer work, and that major work that we see that we need to do with respect to the infrastructure. It's going to provide employment in the city. So that's really a part of what we can do. And I think beyond that, we need to set the climate and continue to work on the fact that geographically our location is key in the province. And I think we have a real optimistic view on what could happen through this recovery. From the geographical location, we service everything that is in any direction of Prince George, strong rail system, strong line system, road corridors are strong. So we just need to continue to promote that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key things for Prince George, and always has been, is that we're a resource service community.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the resource sector, and it will come back, there's no question it'll come back. That's going to certainly bode well for the city.
Yeah, no, for sure. So one other thing here I just want to quickly touch on too, guys, is again, our store is now up and working. So visit the bcrc.ca and go to our store. I know I keep pumping stuff, but that's because Mayor Lyn Hall has a really good following. So we're just gonna keep bumping it up as much as we can. Obviously, you know, one thing I actually want to touch on here really quick is I moved away in 2007. I came back here a couple years ago, and the city has been tremendously different from when I came back, and I think that's a big tribute to yourself. So
Thank you.
You know, we have breweries, we have stuff like that downtown. It is just a completely different city than what it used to be. So.
Yeah, it is. There's no question it's taken a change. I used to come over here as a kid, play hockey and, you know, school sports, and I've been here now about 35 years. My wife is from here and her family's from here, and you take a look at the transition, and I would say, just like you, Clint, that it's the transition has really been significant in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a complete different community. We still have issues. There's no question about it. There's still issues that we have to deal with, hurdles we have to get over, but we'll always be that way. It doesn't matter. Could be 20 years down the road and there'll be issues to deal with. But I'm pretty happy with what we've seen from an investment perspective coming to the city.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I also want to touch on here too is I grew up in the forestry industry. My father started a company in the forestry industry. We're an electrical company, and we service one of the bigger names here in the province. And obviously, you know, 2020, well, 2019 and 2020 haven't been banner years, specifically 2020 for multitude of reasons. So what type of role can local government play in helping the forest industry? I think that's a really big topic.
It is a big topic. And we had talked earlier about the fact that the city of Prince George and our economic development plan has always had forestry as the foundation of any economic development that we see in the city. But when you start to take a look at what's happened over the last few years, and really as a result of what's been going on down in the US with the markets around the world, we've seen smaller mills close down. Isle Pierre not long ago. And today, just a few hours ago, we heard about the McKenzie mill shutting down. So I think for us as a local governments, a big part of our job is advocacy with not only Ministry of Forests, with the provincial government, but also with the federal government.
Yeah.
And we have been around our table pushing for a very long time about the need to secure the forest sector.
Mm-hmm.
It's still going to be the basis of the economy for many of us in the north. And even though we're the largest community in the north, and the forestry sector is doing what they can throughout the region, we're going to weather a little bit of this storm, perhaps better than most. Our economy is a little bit more diversified. But I'll tell you where we take the hit is when a McKenzie has a shutdown in their mill, or there's an impact in Fort St. James, or something happens in Vanderhoof or in Quesnel. That has an impact on the entire region. And for about the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a group of us mayors that have really concentrated on what we can do as a regional group,
mm-hmm.
knowing full well that what is good for a community like Terrace or Vanderhoof is going to be good for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we've really pushed that philosophy. So for me, it's about the advocacy work, bringing ideas to both levels of government about how we think changes can be made within the forest sector.
So we're obviously just a newer coalition here, but you know,
Mm-hmm.
we're really starting to make head waves. Obviously, we have a really good following, and I'm going to thank El Presidente for that, because our president's been amazing. So where do you see and the vice president too? So let's give them both shout outs right now.
Yeah, you don't want to miss it.
I don't want I could miss it. I don't want to miss anybody. And the vice president's bigger than me.
Yeah.
So where do you see the BCRC helping with forestry and stuff like that? Like, what can we get involved with to better educate and better help the industry?
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. So BCRC is relatively new.
Yep.
And I think what you touched on was the educational component is
Mm-hmm.
important. And it's important for BCRC to talk about the resource sector and what it's meant to your business, what it's meant to Willie's business and other folks that are on your board or within the organization as a member. I talk to businesses all the time that are servicing the resource sector, and they rise and fall with how that sector goes. And I think you need to be prepared for the rise and fall of it. And many businesses like yours, Clint, are. But I think it's the educational component that BCRC can really promote and work on throughout the entire region.
So there you go, El Presidente. We got our marching orders. We got to become education providers for
Yeah.
the resource industry. I think we can all agree on that. There's a lot of misinformation with certain groups, and we want to, you know, combat that head on with real live information. Another thing, you know, obviously BC and more specifically Prince George needs a facelift as far as industry is concerned. Again, I will say it. Forest industry is the backbone of BC. It will always be the backbone of BC. I'm a firm believer in that. But, you know, for the downtimes, it's sure going to be nice to have new industries here in BC. And Prince George has been incredibly lucky here. And I think about the past 12 months total, something like that. You know, we've had about $20 billion or something crazy like that announced in projects here in the Prince George area with the West Coast oil fins who we're advocating for, and the BC Hemp Project who also we're advocating for. That must really excite you of a mayor of Prince George.
Yeah, what we've always wanted to do over the last number of years, the previous council and this council, we wanted to put Prince George out there so that investment dollars, investors and developers recognize that Prince George may be an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, business is open.
That's the piece of the puzzle that we wanted to pull together and make sure that there was an understanding that if you were in doing a commercial or an industry, or if you were in a residential building, senior housing building, we wanted you to look at us.
Yeah.
And then go from there. And I've said that for a very long time whenever I'm asked about those two particular projects. And so when I see the amount of development that's been taking place over the last number of years, you're right. It excites me because that's what we were looking for. So when we talk about BC Hemp and when we talk about West Coast Olefins, you know, I want to mention that there are processes that those industries need to go through. No different than what we've seen with LNG or any pipeline activity, mining activity, forest activity. I think it's worth mentioning as well that there's some components there when industry comes into our community or in the surrounding area. And it's the environmental assessment process. There's a public consultation process. There's a First Nations public process. And it's interesting because I think that people sometimes forget that there's those processes in place. If an industry or a developer comes to Prince George and they choose a piece of property, there's also the potential of a rezoning that has to go through city council. So we play a huge role in this, but it's just another opportunity. And I hear from folks every day, just bring opportunity to us.
Let's capitalize on that opportunity.
And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we've got a lot going on. West Coast and BC Hemp have really, come into the city, talked a lot about their operations, and I know that there are a number of people who are following that diligently. And I think at the end of the day, we've achieved what we've wanted to with opening our doors and saying, come on in, give us some consideration, and we'll see where this thing goes.
Prince George is open for business.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that we need to get across, I think, in all of, and really it's not just a Prince George thing, it's a BC thing. We have a tendency here in BC to kill these projects before they even get off the ground. We have one of the best environmental processes in all of the world, and we don't let it get to that point. I think that's a big component of.
And I think it's important to lay it out as I've just done with the fact that there are processes to go through. There's a federal and a provincial process. There's a local process to go through, and as well there's that public consultation piece, both with within the city. So we'll see what happens. We'll see where the two those two proposals end up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you talk about recovery, Clint, that's all part of it. When I talk about Prince George being in the middle of recovery and can really drive not just the region, but we can really drive the provincial economy. We're going to see, and I say again, whether it's a guy building a 200-unit apartment or whether it's somebody coming in to set up a secondary industry to service the resource sector, come in and take a look at what we've got. And if it works out, that's great.
Absolutely. So guys, I'm just going to take another moment here. If you guys have any questions for Mayor Lyn Hall, please keep them resource based, as this is a resource show. So we want to hear what your questions are for Mayor Hall about the resource sector. Also, again, follow us on Facebook, go to the website. Let's get all that stuff. I'm really disappointed in you guys on Instagram right now, because I know everybody that follows us on Facebook has Instagram. Let's get that number pumped up. Let's get that going here, guys. Maybe I'll do a sweater giveaway or something like that just for Instagram. Hint, hint, wink, wink. I don't think I can be any more obvious than that.
No, I don't think so.
Or Mayor Hall, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
So one of these things I want to talk about here is how these projects can shape Prince George. You know, the spin-offs and everything from the bigger projects coming to town, and even with some of the pulp mills taking closures at the moment, and some of the sawmills,
Yeah.
you know, that money doesn't get spent in Prince George. But if these projects do come, all that cycle, the cycle of money is just going to continue to flow through the city.
So take a look at the pandemic we're in, and I've been around to some of the, you know, the hardware stores, lumber stores, for example,
Mhm.
doing huge business. People have got some downtime. They're doing renovations. They're doing yard work. They're building
Guilty.
fences.
I'm
Yeah.
guilty.
And I think, well, me too. And I think we all are in some respect. But you're right. When we look at the economy of Prince George, it's quick to recognize that service industries that service that resource sector will really take a look at us.
Mhm.
Because they want a central location, a larger location. They will travel from Prince George if it's out to Terrace or Kitimat, wherever it might be. The family will stay here, and that gives us a real strong economic base.
Yep.
And you multiply that with, you know, the local investment that's taking place, which I don't want to overlook.
Oh no,
We've got
yeah.
a tremendous amount of developers in this city that do a heck of a job, and they've put huge investment into our city, not just for a decade, but for 30 or 40 years, like family businesses like
Yep.
yours.
Yeah, for sure.
And we need those. That's important to us.
Yeah, I mean the money that, like, personally, obviously my family grew up in a family of 6,
Mhm.
and we grew up out in Blackburn, and you know, we stayed in Prince George because my dad found work in Prince George,
Yeah.
and he thrived here. So all of our money has been spent
Yeah.
in this area. And I think that's a really important thing. These families will stay here and they will spend their money in Prince George and in the surrounding areas.
If I can, I'm just gonna,
for
just
sure.
a quick story, Clint. I was in a barber shop about 2 years ago, and a young guy next to me and his son was getting his hair cut, and the barber said, so are you in town now? You're in town working? And he said, yeah. He said, I've been away, you know, off and on over the years working. It's good to be back. I can spend more time with my wife and my son. And it's because there's work here.
Mhm.
And he looked at me and he said, thanks to you and council.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Absolutely.
I didn't know the guy at all.
Yeah.
But that stuck with me and probably always will, is that you need to create a climate as a city council
Mhm.
For people to be able to work in your community and stay in your community and spend money in our community.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example for me as to what you try to achieve.
Yeah. Well, like I said, this city is completely different from when I left to when I came back. And I think that's a huge banner for your council and yourself, Mayor. I think that you guys have really changed the way the city is perceived. And I think it can only get better with the West Coast Oilfields project and the BC.
And I think there's a balance there. You know, people will talk to me about the resource sector, but, you know, where's the balance? And I was interviewed not long ago by another station, and I was asked just that, where's the balance? Well, the balance for us, as I've talked about all of these regulatory procedures that companies are going to have to go through, but we just passed a month ago our climate action plan in Prince George.
Mhm.
So for me, that's part of the balance. That's part of the safety net.
Yep.
And we want people to understand that we have that climate action plan in place.
And we have to trust it. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah.
point of putting
Yeah.
these things in place is,
Yeah.
is citizens have to be able to trust it, read it, or go through it and trust that your government and your municipalities are going to follow that. And I think, again, I'm getting a little bit passionate here. I know I'm supposed to be on the show, but that's something I'm very passionate about, is that we do not let these projects get to a point where we can even get them off the ground because we have a silent majority not speaking up. And that's what the BCRC is about. So we're going to get to one more question here or so, and then we're going to go to the comment section. So get your questions ready for the mayor. I'm sure he's very eager and excited to answer them. So one of the last questions I'm going to ask you here, Mr. Mayor, is how is the city going to benefit from these projects? So, there's a little bit of a homelessness issue here in town, and the downtown right now is getting built up beautifully. So how is this project going to help along that?
Let me lump it all together. And we have massive work to do from an infrastructure perspective. We have massive work to do from a capital infrastructure perspective because, we're 106 years old now, and we've got a tremendous amount of work to do with our infrastructure. So one of the things that we continually try to do is broaden that tax base.
Mm-hmm.
You broaden the tax base in any capacity, and it gives you the opportunity to do a lot more things. Gives you the opportunity to do it quicker, invest more money into your community, and it's like your house. We got a large house, and we want to continue to invest in it and keep it healthy and keep it strong and keep it from falling apart. And part of that is looking at our social issues.
Yep.
And we can't turn a blind eye to that, Clint.
No, we can't.
They are obvious. And when I ran in 2014, people would say, "What are you going to do about downtown?" Well, and I said, "Look, what I want to do is get investment downtown, get people living downtown." Well, we got $80+ million worth of investment downtown. We have people now living downtown, more to come with the Park House condo development, the student housing. Now the question to me is, what are you going to do about downtown? And it's not about investment. It's about the social issues that we're dealing with, homelessness, mental illness, opioid addiction. And there isn't a day goes by that I don't deal with that in some form or fashion. That's a tougher issue, Clint, than me working with the company to bring Riverbend to Prince George.
Oh yeah.
A lot tougher.
Imagine. Yep.
And it will not go away. There's no magic wand that's going to cure it. So when you talk about investment in our city, you talk about broadening the tax base, it just gives us so much more flexibility to do things. And right now, we've got great partnerships and a couple of projects with Northern Health and BC Housing. The province has stepped up, and so we'll keep plugging along. But
I think something you just said that I'm going to touch on here too is also, building the housing downtown for people to come downtown and live downtown. I think that also does help with some of the issues that you're talking about downtown, because in Kamloops there is some issues with homelessness downtown as well, where I'm from until the last 2 years, and once more people start living downtown, it starts helping.
It does. It's proven.
Yep, absolutely.
It doesn't the need is there, and we talk a lot about the services that we need to provide folks that are living on our streets. And like I said, it won't go away, but we want to be able to manage it and to be able to give these folks options.
Yep. No, for sure. All right, guys. So it's going to be time here for your questions. I got some more promoting of our stuff to do, though. Sorry, Mr. Mayor Lyn Hall. So I want to promote our podcast. It has a name. Are you ready for the name, guys? I love it. It is Wrestling with Resources. I will be the host on it. I'm sure you all are getting sick of my voice by now, but it is. I'm really proud of it. I've actually recorded already 2 episodes on it, and we're going to be having some really big names on the podcast with me coming up. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's gonna be a lot more open forum. Also, we've started a blog. Our very own one of our directors, Mr. Dan Race, has a blog on the BCRC.ca. It is phenomenal. He is a hidden talent when it comes to writing. I didn't know he could write like that. So please check that out. His first one, I believe, was called "I Hate Negativity," and it's a very, very important blog, I think, to read. I think that should be passed around to everybody, because it really helps to understand where people are coming from the silent majority about resource-based projects. So again, those 2 things. I can't with the podcast, I believe, is going to be able to come out on Friday. So the mayor's already said he's going to download it. So let's listen to everybody and let's get that thing downloaded. And let's keep it going. So the first question, Mayor Hall, is from Harry. If West Coast Oilfins goes ahead, actually, I'm going to change when West Coast Oilfin goes ahead, PG and the regional district, can the city share in the tax base?
I guess the simple answer is at this point, no. There would have to be some kind of partnership worked out, but I'm probably no. I guess is my simple answer, Clint, unless that partnership and there's some type of process that we can go through to do that. But
you're going to get money from it, though, as far as, people are going to be working out there. They're going to come to this town. They're going to spend money in Prince George if it is in the regional district.
Yeah, if it's in the regional district, look, I've always said when we meet with a developer, if you can get a little bit of the development, that's good. If you don't, if you can't take it all, but for me, it's about the workforce. And if you look at its location, if it is outside of the municipality, I still think that 90% of the people that are employed are going to live in Prince George.
Yeah, I agree with
And
that.
so it expands, if there's 800 employees, it expands our tax base from a residential tax perspective. It provides just more spending power in our community.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So from Catherine, how will the curtailments in McKenzie affect Prince George?
Well, that's a really good question because, as I said earlier, we talk, a group of us mayors, about what happens in a smaller community has a direct impact on Prince George. So if there's 250 employees out in McKenzie that are no longer employed, that means that we've lost a great deal of our trading area. Those people will spend money in their own community, obviously, but they may also spend money coming into Prince George on a weekend, shopping at Costco and shopping at Home Depot and the mall and Central Builders and all over the place.
Yep.
And we lose that. And that is a huge hit for us. That's why it's so important that we take care of our own community as a council and a senior staff, but that we also recognize the responsibility we have, particularly given the size of the city we are. We have responsibility to everybody else that we trade with.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we have response, our company, I'm trying not to say our company's name right now because I've said it enough. And I think I'm going to get in trouble from the other directors with the amount of say Miltron Electric. So
what company was that?
Yeah, well, Miltron. No, it really, with all these sawmills shutting down around and pulp mills shutting down around, BC, it affects us 100%. So I think that's a really valid question. This question it says, what has the city learned from this, and where will the city, I don't really like that question actually, because I don't quite understand it. We're going to go to Bill. So from Bill, it says, West Coast Oilfin CEO Ken James stated that they would not build without community support. They moved out of the city. The perception is a small vocal opposition accomplished this and cut out the silent majority. Oh, and then so now I get, now what has the city learned from this, and what can the city do differently next time?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's the reason why West Coast made the decision to move outside of the city limits. But I think we've laid the foundation. And I said early on in the interview, Clint, that we laid the foundation to say, look, and I it's an overused cliche, but we're open for business. Come on in and see what we're about. Give us an opportunity. And I think we did that.
I don't think it's an overused statement. You know what? We have to teach people in BC that BC is open for business, and Prince George is, because really we have a negative. I have lots of friends all over the world. Just I've been fortunate in my life to be able to travel, and everyone that I've talked to from other cultures, other countries say, BC is a closed place. It's hard to get industrial stuff built in BC. We have to try to change that. Yeah. We have, again, really high environmental processes here, and we have to trust it.
Well, and we see things, Clint, like investment will start where there's large population base. So you take a look at the island, you take a look at Metro Vancouver, then they move into the Okanagan, and then a few folks go into the Kootenays. And I knew it was just a matter of time if we played our cards right and did a good enough job in putting our name out there, our city out there, through our economic development office and Melissa Barcelos and her team, that people would say, we've got to drive, we've got to take that drive.
Yeah.
We've invested in the Okanagan. Let's take a look at what Prince George has to offer.
Let's drive north. Yep.
Let's come north and see what's going on.
Yep.
And I say quite often to people, well, now that you're here, you're not even in the north.
Yeah.
You're in the central part of BC.
About 10 hours left
and
to drive.
If Mayor Jerry Thiessen from Vanderhoof is listening, sorry, Jerry, I know you're right at the epicenter of the province, so my apologies. But, anyway, I want you to get here. And I think we've seen that transition. People have thought about and invested in other parts of the province, and pretty progressive community, progressive council, and why stop? Why not come up and take a look?
Well, that's an easy plug for me. So our first podcast with Mr. Rajpal Fagura, the owner of Sky Path Consulting. He's a accountant down in Vancouver, and he talks about the way money flows through cities and the way everything is done. So our first podcast, Wrestling with Resources, will be live on, well, not live, but will be ready for download on Friday. So look forward to getting that out there. Our question here is from Adam. How inclusive has BC Hemp been with the city in sharing their plans?
Very. So we were invited to the unveiling of BC Hemp out at the old Ritchie Brothers office. A great event. There was, I don't know, a couple hundred people there at the announcement. And I thought they did a great job walking through what BC Hemp is all about, and really opened people's eyes as to the use of hemp in our
so many uses.
In industry and in our society today. And then, of course, when they announced their big announcement, what here
on the BCRC show
2-3 weeks ago, Clint.
Yeah,
we had some conversations about what they were going to do there. It's interesting. When you talk about those kinds of big productions, it's almost a BCRC. When you talked about education, it's almost like that. I need to be educated. We all do, because they're massive operations.
With both of those projects,
and I think you just need to get your head around what, in fact, they're all about.
Yeah.
So there's an education piece that I look to do all the time when companies come into town, and I want to know more about what they do.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing. Is I've listened to Ken James and his team talk quite a bit. I've listened to Remy Balaj and his team talk quite a bit. And I really think you have to understand what those projects are about before you have any sort of negative condensation to it or positive. You have to understand what they're about. And Ken's done, I don't know how many presentations, but I've seen like 40 from him, it seems like. And people have to realize we're wasting. With the natural gas, we're wasting money just letting it flow by. That's what the West Coast Oilfields project is about, is value adding.
Yeah, and I'll talk to anybody that is willing to give me an hour of their time to educate me in that process. I'm not a chemical engineer.
No, me neither.
I'm not a chemical scientist. So I need to learn this, because eventually municipalities have decisions to make on large projects, whatever they are. And you need to understand what the project is, because you want to make the best decision possible.
Yep.
So it's all about that education.
Awesome. So another question here is from Trudy. If you guys, again, if you have any more questions, please just leave them in the comment section. But I think we're going to be closing shop here pretty quick. So this question is from Trudy. What is the city doing to highlight the importance of the resource sector to the city plus region?
Yeah. So let me talk about three things. We have a bioeconomy conference here, which is one of the largest, actually one of the largest in the world. We have the Council of Forest Industries have their convention and conference here every year. Unfortunately, not this year, nor the bioeconomy. And the Resource Forum that started, about a decade ago? Has it been that long now? Maybe 8 or 9 years. That's a huge piece. And let me talk specifically about the Resource Forum, Clint. So that brings people in from all over Canada and the US to take a look at what the resource sector is offering. What businesses, what companies are involved, but it's also it also involves a company that we haven't talked about, but Pacific Bio, for example.
Oh yeah,
And they're a big part of that bioeconomy that we have, and sometimes we forget about that. And for me, that's part of the resource sector.
Pinnacle Pellet, all those
exactly. So I think those three pieces that I've mentioned on a yearly basis, the bioeconomy conferences every 2 years, but it really promotes what has been the foundation of the economy, not only in Prince George, but the North for a very, very long time. And I would invite anybody, and hopefully the Resource Forum can come back next year, and we're out of the pandemic. It's an important educational piece for people to come to. Great speakers on every resource that you can imagine, and it's important to attend.
Yeah, I think one of the things here too is I'm probably going to finish off the questions here because I have a couple of my own. but thank you so for your time, Mayor Hall. But
You're
one
welcome.
question I kind of want to get into is because I had Andy Beasley actually. Well, spoiler alert, I had Andy Beasley, the vice president of the Prince George Cougars, on with me on the podcast today, and we talked about the Prince George Cougars and
Yeah.
some of the struggles that they're having with having the stadium, getting people to the stadium. And I think these projects are going to be a big spin-off and be able to drive people to the
Yeah.
stadium. I think that's something that gets not overlooked.
Well, I'm going to give a big plug to the Prince George Cougars and Prince George Spruce Kings. Talk about both the teams, but the Cougars, I heard a lot of people say years and years ago, we'd love to have local ownership. We'd love, local guys that we know to own it, and we'll support it. The Prince George Cougars, for us, is no different than Vancouver having the Vancouver Canucks.
100%.
It's WHL hockey. It puts your city on the map. And then when we turn around and say that we've got a BC junior team, Prince George Spruce Kings as well,
Mm-hmm.
Really a city-owned, not
Yep.
corporate city, but
Yep.
City-owned
Yep.
team, and doing so well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just another selling piece for me to be able to use when I meet with investors and talk about the amount of sports that we have. And I'm a big sports guy.
Oh, me too.
My twin daughters played for UNBC women's soccer team.
Oh, there you go.
I love sports, grew up with it.
We'll get you on the podcast. We'll talk more about
Yeah,
sports.
yeah, it means a lot to the city.
Yep, I agree with that. I grew up in sports.
We can't lose either one of them, and Andy does a heck of a job with the team over there.
Phenomenal job,
Yeah.
and I think that one of the things that even the BCRC wants to get involved with is trying to drive people towards the Cougars. I think it's important for our community. I think it's a staple. They came here in 1994, and I go back to Blair Betts. That was my guy when I was growing up. But we're getting a little off top here, so I think that's it. I think we're good. I think we're going to close out the BCRC show. So if thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
Mayor.
you're welcome, Clint. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. So for Mayor Lyn Hall, this is Clint Chappell of the BCRC. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.